Hey there, and welcome back to Culturally Sound. I am here with Jeff Parnell of JHP Advisors. He is the CEO and provides interim and fractional CEO services for succession, exit, and transition planning. Jeff, thanks so much for joining me. And how did you get started in this space?
Well, what really launched me was my first, what we'll call the first real job in the 1980s when I joined a catalog company called Overton's. And the really cool thing there, Chandler, was, and it wouldn't be cool to everybody, but it was to me. I joined the company with no job description. I was the first full-time marketing employee ever. No job description other than make the numbers work. It was high stakes, high pressure. We were sitting at $20 million at the time in revenue, grew that to $80 million. And looking back, it was the ideal training ground for broadening my horizons later because any numbers project that didn't go to the CFO came to me. So it's a fantastic opportunity. And I met really my first and most prominent mentor there who turned 81 a couple of months ago.
Oh, wow, good for him. Still around.
He is.
Excellent. And what sort of prompted you into that space? What gave you the courage, the confidence to sort of say, I can do this. This is just what excites me.
It was personal, Chandler. I'd met this gentleman my senior year of undergrad. I coached his daughter in junior high girls basketball, met him. We struck up a relationship, and then several years later, I called him and said, I think this makes sense. He said, I agree, and the next day we had a deal.
Wow.
And, he was growing. He was a bit of a legend in my hometown of Greenville, North Carolina. And it just felt right. No, I'd love to say I made this deep dive analytical review. That wouldn't be the case, but I just felt good. And you go with your heart sometimes, right?
Well, and I think that's more to the point now than ever, right? It's so hard to have trust in the hires, and I think this is why the hiring process in the HR space is just a little tumultuous right now. It's easier to stay in a job you don't love than find a new job that you will. And I think it's through those relationships that people are finding the work, right? And I mean, I don't think you're alone in that. I think the reality is you just got to take a chance and go for it. And if it doesn't work out, figure it out.
Well, that's right. You do go with your gut, your heart. I'm a man of faith, and that was a big part of my decision too. There, it was the right move, and I didn't need a big glorious job description. And was it easy from day one? Absolutely not. There was a lot of tough sledding for 10 years, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was the best opportunity I could ever had at that point in my career.
Interesting. So how did you end up where you are now? What drove that decision? What gave you the courage and the ambition and the confidence to sort of start up and I mean, stepping into, what, I'll hold on my follow up and we'll start there.
I knew coming out of school, I wanted to be a CEO one day.
Okay.
I was ready to be a CEO at 23, 24, aren't we all? Obviously, it wasn't going to be the time, but I just wanted an opportunity for someone. I played basketball. I gave it up in college, but I played basketball and was always a very fierce, tenacious competitor. And I wanted somebody to give me the ball and say, take this thing and do with it what you can. I'm going to watch you. I'm going to hold you accountable, but make it happen. And this opportunity presented that to me. And that really became the hallmark of my career. I got to do all kinds of interesting things, and I was on the firing line every day, but became more and more accustomed to it. That's very much my DNA. I like to be held accountable.
Where do you think that comes from? Where is that in your past? What sparked that understanding and awareness for you?
Great question. I think there are two variables. First of all, I grew up in a very rural part of North Carolina. We always felt in Greenville, NC, that we had a little bit of a chip on our shoulder. We had to outwork people. We weren't the favorite sons of the state of North Carolina. That was part of it. And I'll tell you a moment that really helped me. It didn't help me at the moment, but it sure helped me going forward. Sounds silly, but I was cut from the basketball team in ninth grade.
Okay.
and that fired me up.
Yeah.
And I made it a point I was not going to get cut again. And I was not a very, multidimensional guy back in those days. It was 100% basketball and nothing else. But I wanted to make that team next year to prove people wrong. And I did. And my son once asked me, Dad, you ever feel like you wasted your time in basketball because you didn't pursue it once you got to college? You dropped it. I said, absolutely not. It built a lot in me that is still there to this day. I use the phrase a lot in business, diving after loose balls. I don't want people reaching. I want them diving. And that's just who I am.
No, and I mean, it's kind of interesting, the relationship of business and sport is
Hmm.
often made, right? And the lessons learned, the way that you collaborate with a
Yep.
teammate, the
Yep.
the particularly in non-solo sports, if you're in
Yes.
skiing or tennis, it's sort of harder to make those relationships. But basketball, hockey, baseball, football, they're easy. You got to fight
Yeah.
for every inch, and all of the rest. So I think that sort of instills that understanding where people who don't have the opportunity to participate in organized sports such as
Yeah.
that, you know they have to gain those lessons learned elsewhere. So
And you gain
um,
confidence too. And that was a big confidence builder for me as I got to be a better player. I got to be a better person and a more confident person, more assured in
mhm,
one aspect of my life that I later was able to translate into business.
mhm. And so now you're diving headfirst into unknown waters.
Mhm.
Where do you start with that process? Client calls you up and says, "Hey, we're in need of some leadership. Our CEO, for whatever reason,
Mhm.
step away. We need someone that can quickly step in while we find someone to better steer and man the ship." What does day one look like for you?
Why? Why do you need someone? What's the genesis of this? What's caused something to happen? You're going to look at the numbers. You're going to look at the situation. You're going to assess the people. And the other piece, and I emphasize this a lot, I have a framework that I've now developed over a lot of years of trial and error. Are you going to be real with me? If you're not going to be real and open and transparent with me, we really there's not a way for us to build something. It's no different than in basketball. Your teammates know where they're supposed to be at the court at every given time. They're there. They're absolutely there, and you're there for them.
Mhm.
So that's really what I do. I want to look at what's your why. And in some cases, we just lost someone. In other cases, we need to sell the business. I've got
Ah,
a son, daughter who wants to take over the business. There's a
mm,
lot of different variables, but I need to understand your why and what has taken place up to that point as much as I possibly can.
mhm, mhm. And when does it work? When doesn't it work?
I can tell you when it doesn't work first. It's
Mhm,
the easiest. If you're not straight up, if we're
mhm,
not developing that open, honest rapport, and sometimes you get a moment where it happens instantly. I've had that happen a number of times. That's amazing when it does. But other cases, you've got to build and get to there relatively quickly. Time's not on your side usually. I like the dramatic relationships. I like something that is challenged. They are they need someone immediately. They needed somebody 3 weeks ago. That's what I crave for.
okay.
And we can get, but if we can get to that openness and transparency, honesty quickly, we can build something. So that's what it boils down to. But if we can't, I can't help you. Beyond that, are we willing to be teammates? I'm going to share with you what I can bring to the table. I'm not perfect, nor is anyone else, but I need to know where your weaknesses are, and where you're willing to be guided, coached, sewn into.
Hmm. Hmm. And how do you mine for that conflict? How do you find that space that it's always easy to hear what's being told to you and take it at face value, but when the hairs go back up, they start standing up on the back of your neck, so something isn't quite right here. I need to dig into this a little bit. Do you get that, or am I speaking?
No, you could not be more right because I've gone into situations where um, half the leadership team, we'll put it that way, one of the
Okay.
two owners
Yeah.
was really on board. The other said he was on board, but
Yes.
clearly was not.
Okay.
And it takes, It's been trial and error. I'm not going to kid you, but now what I've started to do more and more is I have more of that open dialogue up front. I really do. And I'll give you kind of an interesting example.
Please.
My wife and I met in business. I did the thing you don't do generally. I hit on a vendor. Okay. Happened one time and I was one for one. So it worked out great.
Worked out well.
Yeah. But what was interesting is we were 600 miles apart. And when you're 600 miles apart, you're not seeing each other, but every few weeks,
Hmm.
you ask the tough questions. And as I started to analyze this whole process, you're very open. You
Hmm.
know, 600 miles apart, it's not an easy thing to do any more than when you're going into a situation and they're struggling, they're losing employees, morale's sinking, they've got to make some big changes. We don't have time to waste. Now, I use a concept I call urgency without panic. No one's saying panic. And I've got personal reasons, health reasons that have trained me over the years to take it seriously but not panic, because if you do, you lose.
Hmm.
But let's just be honest. Let's make it happen, and but let's not hide things from each other,
Hmm.
and let's be vulnerable. I'll be vulnerable with you. I'll tell you my challenges, but you need to tell me yours.
And do you lead with that? Do you lead with trust? Do you lead with
I do now.
vulnerability?
I do now,
You
absolutely.
know.
More than ever I do, because I've been in situations where it just, as we say in the South where I'm from, the dog won't hunt. And I want to know early on that's the case. It's
Yeah.
just in everybody's best interest, because if I'm in, I can't be half in. My mindset, my DNA is I want to be 1,000% in, and we want to make it work.
You want the ball.
I want the ball, and I want to help you win the game.
Yeah. 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 Interesting. So all of that said, you sort of you're in there day one, you're looking for the why, and you've got the one partner that's all in, the one partner that sort of half pregnant on the whole idea, and you've got to win that individual over.
Yeah.
Do you go in and you win that individual over, or is it an all or nothing thing for you?
It doesn't have to be all or nothing immediately.
Okay.
But if we're going to get the job done, we need to get pretty darn close to all or nothing.
Okay.
And sometimes you're misled going in, which is why I've developed more of a framework.
Yeah.
I've had situations where the person of two partners who hired me was 1,000% in. We know this is something we need to do. Said all the right things,
Hmm.
but then I was realizing there's some other things back there that weren't going to allow this to happen, and I had to resign the account.
Yeah.
So you're willing to be patient. It's not that everybody has to sing your tune on day one.
Sure.
And frankly, it's really not my tune. I think it's the tune that we all need to have when transitions what you're trying to do. This is not grow 10% in sales.
Right.
This is, yeah, that might be a part of it, Chandler, but a big part of it is we've got to transition in some major way. And
Hmm.
that, we don't wake up in the morning thinking about all the things we need to change and excited about all the things we need to change. That's a tough thing for 99% of us. We need to go in all in with the idea that we're going to be open about it.
So that's an interesting point, right? When you're I guess when you're long term strategizing as a CEO, or coming in and taking the CEO seat, you're looking to, and maybe I've got this backwards in my head, so please feel free to jump in at any point.
Yep.
So it's a different scenario when you're looking for a succession plan
Mm-hmm.
versus an exit strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Succession, you're looking to make sure all the systems are intact, make sure all of them are working, find the
Yep.
bottlenecks, open them up, and improve their systems. Because we all know you are as successful as your
Yep.
systems, not your loftiest goals, right? Thank you, Adam
Yep.
Clear. Now, however, when it's an exit, do you handle things differently?
There's a lot of differences, but there are a lot of similarities too, because view it as a house. You want the house to be in as good a shape as it possibly can be. If there are leaks, you need to fix them.
Hmm.
Unless we're talking about a fire sale here, which we usually aren't when I'm involved, although I can get into those if you need me to.
Yeah, yeah.
We want to fix it up. We want it as smooth and as easy as possible for the owner to come in and number one, see it's not a fixer upper, and also see and picture themselves as the one or someone on their team being the one to run it, as opposed to one that requires John or Susan to be there for 2 years helping out.
Right. Right.
So they're very similar in that way. We just want to make sure it's clean, functional, and replicatable, as
I,
opposed to something where there's only one person who knows where the secret recipe is located.
I appreciate the house framework as I come from construction, and you know, when I used to get called in for, hey, we want to sell this house,
Yeah.
I was always wary of the client that wanted to put lipstick on the pig and just send it to market. I'd often try to step away from that
Yes.
experience. I'd much rather work with, the ones that are understanding about fixing the problems they know they have
Yes.
and putting the best product forward. And it sounds that, what does lipstick on a pig look like in the business world to you?
It's basically a charade. It's basically not being 100% truthful. It's not being open about your challenges. It's suggesting you've got the best team known to humankind, when in
Yeah.
fact you don't. Be honest. People are
Yeah.
going to figure it out, and we should all be honest and people of integrity. Um, and really, it's you know obviously there's the situations where you're saying things that aren't true. But if you're walking through, say, the performance of your top 10 customers and
Here
you're
we go.
sharing that, if you're a B2B company and you're selling that with a buyer, be honest.
Yeah.
If you've had challenges with a couple of them, let's be open and honest about it, and as opposed to saying, yeah, this has been a great customer for years, they're not going anywhere. You may know for a fact they're negotiating with two other competitors of yours. Just
Here
put
we
it
go.
out there.
Yep.
Yep.
And I said, being a communication consultant, I always struggle with echo chambers, and I imagine that you do as well. So when
Absolutely.
you walk into that first meeting and everyone's nodding their head when the CEO is talking, is that a red flag? How do you tear that down? How do you pull that apart? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I part of my engagement is I'm better and I can deliver more value when I'm allowed to talk to the key people, not just the owner or the CEO or the CFO or whomever. I want to get
Mm-hmm,
to know the team a little bit because they will get to a point relatively quickly where most of them will talk openly and honestly.
mm-hmm,
I tell them point blank, I'm not going to take what you say back to the owner. What I will do, full disclosure, I will incorporate that into my work
mm-hmm,
and potentially in recommendations if that's appropriate. But
mm-hmm.
you can help me, the infamous help me help you. You can help me do a better job with this engagement by being truthful. Because if I don't get that opportunity, if I've got one radio station I'm listening to, I might not get the right mix of music. I need to hear it from all of them.
That's right. That's right. How do you open up those trust pathways? What do you have some go-to strategies? Do you take them and the wife out for dinner? Do you bring in, a foosball table? What does that solution look like
You
for you?
know, I have done that. Not the foosball table or the backgammon board, but I have taken folks out to dinner. Coffee is a great cure too. Sit down in a relaxed mode. Scheduling, I know everybody's busy, but scheduling longer for a meeting than you would really need. If you've really got 15 to 30 minutes, schedule an hour and be relaxed and get to know them a little bit. What makes you tick? Where you're from? You know, I see you've got a keychain with a Chihuahua on it. I happen to have a Chihuahua for years. You get to know them a little bit and understand them, and I want them to know really who I am, a little bit about my background and what makes me tick.
Mhm.
I'm not talking about how amazing I might be or think I am or anything else, but what makes me tick as a person and what I'm looking for, which is openness and honesty, and try to build that and being very vulnerable about it. And sometimes, and we might get to this in this podcast. I mean, I had a major health scare, almost 8 years ago. Sometimes I get into that, not for spectacular purposes, but just to be able to say, hey, I'm real. And you should understand a perspective. I'm being open with you. I want the same, you'd be open with me.
And I think that's why you might see a little bit more success in that space, because you're leading with that vulnerability. You're leading
Right.
with trust. You're leading
Yep.
with, here's my soft belly. Cut me if you need
Yes.
to. Let's but let's have a real conversation. And
Right.
what do you have you ever had the experience where you're going into that space and you're feeling a little sabotaged, or there's
Oh,
there's someone.
never. Everybody plays by the rules 100% of the time. No one ever does that. Chandler, come on. Oh wow, yes, I've had that a couple of occasions, and you look for the bad actors early.
Hmm.
Um, if it's the CEO sabotaging it or the owner,
Yeah.
you may not be able to make that happen unless you're working for a board.
Right. Right.
Okay, but I look for that. I try to establish trust and openness and rapport with the person who's brought me in to the point where we can talk openly about this,
Hmm.
and I'll look for opportunities to get into that. But yes, saboteurs are often there. I don't uncover it every day, but yes, it absolutely happens. And there's people who are holding on to something. They don't want change for whatever reason, or maybe they think the type of change I'm going to bring for whatever reason is not going to benefit them. That may or may not be the case.
Interesting. And is it often a monetary reasoning, or is it they feel like they've been stepped over, or like what do you typically sort of keep your finger on the pulse of there?
Yeah, the financial piece is certainly out there, depending on the individual, but it's more security and self worth. I found.
Hmm.
Are you threatened as a person? I've given 22 and a half years to this company. How dare you say this? Well, maybe the owner has mailed it in for 18 of those years.
Right.
Maybe when you're brought in, you were doing everything, but you've just kind of lingered around. Maybe in
Hmm.
some cases, you might have been the most valuable player ever, but
Yeah.
it's your self worth. If you've been with a company a while, you see this a lot. Are you appreciated, or maybe you didn't feel appreciated, and I happen to unearth it because I was brought in. So over time, you get better at assessing these things and really understanding what makes them tick. But these are people you're talking about, not machines.
The percentage of companies that you go into that have an HR department versus don't, do all of the businesses you work with typically have an HR person, or do you find some of them outsource that, or don't involve that? And what is the relationship? Do you find that they're more successful when the HR is in place, or less successful, or there's a lot to unpack there. So I'll let
Yeah, a
you
lot
take.
to unpack. So I'm going to say about 50-50
Yeah.
have a formalized department. The ones
Okay.
that don't, it's gone to another department. Often I see it go to the accounting or payroll department. That seems to be a logical place in a lot of these places. Um, the most important thing for HR is, are these people really serving the business? Do they understand the business well enough to know what people need? And are they real partners with the business? Many are not. But HR is a huge part of what I have to do in terms of understanding. If I've got an HR person, a dedicated function, or even a non-dedicated function, I want to know: tell me your understanding of the business. What do you believe the business's strengths are, the weaknesses? If you're hearing a lot like, well, the owner of this, the owner of that, and not a lot of independent thinking, and I respect the fact it's not always easy to be an independent thinker. I do. But if all of it's about just politicking and passing the buck and not making waves, that's a tough deal. And if that's the case, we have to talk about why. And maybe I go to the CEO and I say, listen, I'm sensing from people, and I'm not going to call anybody out, okay? I'm sensing from people that everybody here wants to please you. No one wants to cross you. Can we talk about that in a little while?
Mm.
Because that's real in so many cases.
Ugh,
So many
yeah.
cases.
Yeah. And I mean that's that echo chamber that
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to tear down, right? And you sort of pointed to an interesting concept, which is HR normally starts in accounting and finance,
Yep.
which is it. I'm curious about your perspective on this. Do you think that that's a healthy place for HR to start, or do you try to reframe that and reposition that as you transition that company or business?
Yeah, if I'm going down the road of we're going to rebuild and reorganize, absolutely, I want to reframe that. It's the logical place for it to start in many cases. I mean, the head of marketing, the CFO, these kinds of people are not generally the ones to do it. Someone in the, in a high finance role, but not necessarily CFO role or payroll, head of payroll, that's the place because they're processing things. The problem is they often don't have the the more holistic view of HR as a not as a payroll department, not as a processing paperwork department, but one that should be involved in developing people. I want to find people who want to, help develop people because that's really what HR is supposed to be about. The other things are functions, but their mission should be to help bring the right people into the building, make sure you understand their needs, communicate those needs, and help them be great A players whenever possible.
So I take a bit of a different perspective on this, and only because
Mhm.
uh, I start with communication. I
Mhm.
often consider that, and I'll probably get a lot of pushback on this, but um, I feel like marketing today versus marketing
Mhm.
even 10 years ago is very different.
Yeah.
And I feel like how you market internally, HR,
Mhm.
should directly reflect how you market externally.
Mhm.
And I say this because you're looking today more than ever, you're looking to
Mhm.
build community. You're
Yeah.
looking to find your people. And if you can't have a raving lunatic fan internally, how
Right.
will you ever get that externally?
Okay.
So
Great point.
I think moving HR or people and culture, or however you want to frame it or phrase it, I think moving it out of finance, having them
Yep.
collaborate where it's a conversation and a collaboration, because they, as you pointed to, need to handle payroll and they need to handle
Yep.
those types of things. But then there's an advocacy around the individual, the employee, not
Right.
just the dollars and cents, which I think is where people today need a lot more comfort and
Yep.
trust in understanding that they're there for something more than just to punch something at the end of the day, right?
Absolutely. And in I could not agree with that more. Uh, what I've always done when I've hired people, particularly in small companies,
Hmm.
you've got your handful of thought leaders and ambassadors, the people, you want people to meet because if they're around this person, they're going to feel the excitement, enthusiasm, and particularly if they've been with the company a little while, or they just made a decision to join the company and turn something else down. If there's a story behind it, they carry a lot of clout. Now, the person may or may not work for them if they're hired, depending on the role. But absolutely, I want those people. I never believe your only contact or your primary contact through the process should be HR. HR is the conduit to make things happen and whatever that looks like in a company. But the ambassadors, preferably two if possible, not just one, but at least one who's really, really going to be championing the company and telling their story. Big believer in storytelling.
Hmm.
Why are they
Hmm.
doing that?
Hmm.
Uh, and if I'm CEO, I want to play that role too in terms of my why. Why am I there? What is it about this place I really love?
Hmm.
That's a big, big part of it because you're right. People are making decisions, and dollars and cents is part of it, but it's not all of it. We all know that.
Right. Have you seen much of a transition or change in shaping talent retention 10 years ago versus today?
Yes, absolutely. There is no doubt. I mean, COVID changed the world forever in so many ways, this being one of them. People have this feeling they can be more mobile than ever before. The work from home creates some new challenges there too sometimes. But no, you've got to really make sure people belong. And little
Hmm.
things like if, and sometimes it's a matter of the CEO being available for people. And if they can I just talk to you, Jeff, for 15 minutes? If I say, yeah, how about a month and a half from next Thursday? That's not acceptable. Yet there are a lot of people. I know somebody I'm thinking about right now runs a
Yeah.
business, and this is not a big business he runs, but he's so inaccessible. How does anybody feel belonging? And he's got a lot of people who don't belong, don't feel they
Hmm.
belong there. And, that's a big, big part of it. So being open, being transparent, and the old model of being assigned a mentor, there's an adaptation of that, which is let these things happen organically, and they will, but invite them to happen.
Hmm.
Invite them to happen.
Is that based around having a higher degree of curiosity as a leader? And that's how I interpreted what you shared.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot
And
of curiosity and wanting to know what makes them tick, where they fit, but also one of our biggest opportunities as a leader is to get the best team on the field we can get. And if you looked at it just from a numeric standpoint, if you can't get the right people, you're not going to be successful. If you can't hold on to the best people, you're certainly not going to be successful. So do it right. It's the best investment you'll ever make in getting people really engaged and on board.
How do you, so what you just shared sort of poses a question around, sacred cows, burning the boats,
Yep.
firing the assholes, all of those details.
Yep.
How do you dig into that when you land in an environment, and to determine who stays, who goes, and how to sort of trudge that path forward? Do you thin the herd? Do you like what does all that look like?
Sometimes you have to. I believe in testing. I think you throw out some tests and you see how they'll respond. You do. I like to lead with listening and teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I spent better than 10 years as an adjunct professor of business. Love that experience. Haven't done it in a number of years, but I'd like to teach. I like to instruct, and I want to get in. Have a kind of a regroup after we've had a situation. So let's revisit what just took place here. When you said you recommended that we do the following, why was that?
Mm-hmm.
And help me understand. And you look for the keywords. Back to your, I love the topic of sacred cows, and I'll tell you a quick story here in a moment on that front. But I want to find out, are you so beholden to the sacred cows that you won't fight them?
Mm-hmm.
That you won't fight them. Now, I'm not saying you fight everything, okay? But you have to pick your battles. That being said, when I was running a business, I had a private equity guy call me and said, okay, your business might be one we look at. What's your 10%, Jeff? And by that, he said, there's at least 10% of things going on because you don't own the company. I didn't own that business. That you would change immediately if you had the opportunity. What are those and what impact will they make?
Mm-hmm.
And that invites a whole nother level of dialogue.
What a great question.
And it was, use your imagination. They're usually these initiatives that got put in place years ago by the founder, the owner, or a previous CEO that should have been butchered long ago, but they weren't. Sacred cow.
Yes. Yes.
There's a product line you're offering, a service you're offering. There's people out there representing you who are not the best choice, but because the owner was involved in it, he or she can't step back, be humble enough to say, maybe its time has passed. Maybe it wasn't there to begin with, but at the very least, maybe it hasn't passed. That one question made me think a lot when he said,
I
what's your
like that.
10%? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really like that. It's so often, I end up sitting or talking with team members, and they're sharing stories, and for me, how I frame it is, if you were running things, what would you do different?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
but I like the 10%, because that I feel like that disarms the question,
Yes, it does.
where it's a little more hypothesizing and less direct. So I definitely like that approach.
But it's challenged to make sure, he know how I thought. Was I inquisitive enough about the business to really try to make improvement? Because after all, this is all about improvement. If you're talking about a business that's generating $2 million a year at the bottom line,
Sure.
EBITDA, we'll say,
Sure.
are you content with that, or is there another 500,000 you can get very quickly by changing some things that you're not allowed to change today?
And if you don't have the right person driving the bus, which
Mhm.
in so many of these situations there may not be, because
Right.
how do you tell the owner that, anyway, we know the story there. It's incredible how much revenue is being left on the table just because it's the way they always done things.
Absolutely. And it just, again, this is where the openness and vulnerability and transparency all come in. Great leaders have that. Great owners have that. Um, I worked with an owner a while back, and to her credit, she had all these tendencies, all these capabilities. And she was able to say, you know what? I've been here a while. There's some things I probably missed.
Mm.
and I'm open about that. I'm real about it. I've had a great run, but it's probably my time to do something else. And when you can get that, wow, it's like oil was springing loose from every well in the house. It was just an amazing moment, and I don't take that for granted. It doesn't happen every day, but when it does, that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, no, it's exciting when there is humility, curiosity, and self awareness at the helm of the ship,
Right.
and you know, what do you know what I think this is a good time to sort of pull on that thread. You'd mentioned that you had a transition in your life
Yep.
about 8 years ago, I think. Um, has that changed you? Did that change the way that you led? Did that change the person that you are, how you perceive things? What did that do for you?
Well, that's a big deal. Let me give you kind of the backdrop here first about
Yes.
what that was. So, 7.5 years ago, I received a heart transplant at Cleveland Clinic. I was, I had a heart that was slowly failing, like a battery that could not be recharged.
Hmm. Hmm.
Cleveland Clinic had investigated all kinds of things. It wasn't blockage. It wasn't this. It wasn't that. It was 100% a failing heart. I went in after a checkup the month prior and said, "Listen, I'm not feeling well." They said, "Okay, we'll run some more tests." And they said, "You're staying for a while." 5 weeks later, I leave with a new heart. So let me tell you how it impacts you. It's not
Yeah.
a lot of fun going through that. I mean, you don't sleep well. I was in ICU for a while. You're getting poked, prodded in the middle of the night by the vampires taking your blood and checking you.
Yeah.
But I had a world class team around me. They were 100% caring and loving to me. My wife from about 100 miles away was there every day except for two during 5 weeks. Pretty good track record considering we had a daughter in high school. That's not an easy thing to do with a busy schedule.
Yeah.
But, how did that change me? You can't, you have to start with gratitude. I'm grateful I got another chance. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
When I went in under the knife, I was excited to go in. There was an ounce of fear in me. I couldn't wait because I was going to come out better. And I did.
You
Um, I,
believed.
I couldn't wait for that. So gratitude's a big thing. Also, this whole idea, it's cliche-ish, but it's real for me. Don't waste the day. And
Yeah.
I try to make sure my clients understand, listen, you don't know what tomorrow will bring if tomorrow's even coming. Last weekend, that would have been June 20th, I believe,
Hmm.
or the 21st on a Saturday. Fred Smith, the creator of FedEx, died at 80. And he was one of my most admired CEOs. I got a picture on my desk of the two of us together from way back, probably 30 plus years ago. But that's a guy who was told no at Yale. Your business plan for overnight delivery isn't going to work. He didn't listen. So make things happen today. That's a big part of what I believe in, Chandler. A big part. And I had a chance to meet the surgeon later. That only fueled all of this even further. That was a great conversation.
What, if you don't mind sharing, what
Yeah.
what what did that conversation entail?
Well, very simply, about 3 years later, because I didn't meet him after the transplant, he came by and I was still out, which is often the case. They're not on your train except for that moment. You never see them again. That's not they're not on your rotation. They're on to other people. So I arranged to meet him several years later. Went in and sat down with him. It's during COVID, so we're wearing masks. So I've got pictures of us wearing masks, which is kind of interesting. But I couldn't see his facial expression. But I asked him. I said, his name is Dr. Smadira. I'll call him out. An amazing man and rock star surgeon. So I said, so what goes through your mind when you're told, okay, you're on in 8 hours or 10 hours? He looked at me with these fierce, competitive eyes and said, I love what I do. I get the team together and tell them we're going in to win. And I'm going to tell you, they have a lot of rock stars at Cleveland Clinic, but if I was lining them up, there's no way I wouldn't have picked this guy because that just impacted me forever. Said, you know what? There was not an ounce of fear. Now, granted, you're not 100% when you do these things. You never are. But he expected to win. And that's the way he went in. And that's the way, I think you have to go into a transitional relationship in business. You're there to fix things. Don't blow the moment, be in the moment, and you can win. And what's really cool is several years later, just last fall, I'm getting a book ready to go to press here. during Q3 is the plan. But I had a chance to talk to him, and he agreed to write the foreword of my book. And that meant the world to me because he got this whole metaphor of transition as in heart transplant being very similar to transition as in a business transplant. And he started using the term transitionist. I said, yeah, you transition lives with hearts. I transition businesses. At least that's what I want to do. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that really hit me harder than ever that experience made really a tremendous impact.
Gave you life. Yeah, no,
Gave
no.
me life and gave me perspective in a way that you could not create. No, it was.
Did it cause you to slow down any? Do you find that you're entering environments with less haste, or did it shape the way that you approach challenges?
Oh,
Like
that's a
it,
great question because I've always been the high energy guy, the enthusiastic guy in the room. That's just my mindset, my personality. If I'm interested in something, you'll know. I don't have to tell you I'm interested. You'll see it. So slow down. I don't know if I slowed down a bit. I feel better physically than I felt in years. And it wasn't that I was feeling bad up until the very end. But I do think it's given me the ability to reflect a little bit and to say this one thing. Let's be urgent, but let's not have panic. And by the same token, we're going to solve this problem, but let's, reflect for a minute, not reflect for 3 weeks, but let's just reflect a little bit and get at it. And it doesn't take me 3 days longer to jump on it. But in the past, I might have jumped on it in 5 minutes. Now I might take, let me revisit this and think about this overnight. Let's get at it tomorrow.
interesting. With I guess it just sort of brings a layer of patience and perspective on what's truly important, and keeping the goal in focus and not
Yeah.
necessarily just the plan.
Yeah. But again, you don't lose the energy or the call to action, but you're right. It's a different kind of focus that only an experience like this, in my opinion, gives you the ability
Sure.
to do.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And I've got to ask, only because you mentioned that you knew Bill Smith personally. There's
That's me.
there's that there's that story around him betting it all in a casino. Is that, am I recalling the right story? Is this true?
I don't know if that was a story. I know he was a pretty vibrant guy that did lots of interesting things. I do know the one of my favorite parts of the story, other than him not him getting a C in his class at Yale,
Hmm.
was the first night it launched. I think there were two packages, and I think they were his going to himself. So I mean, everybody was laughing at him, but he created a whole industry.
Of course, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, no, can't
yeah,
take that away. Sure.
and they became
Interesting.
a partner of ours at that job with Overton's.
Yeah.
I mean, a great business relationship. That's how actually I met my wife through FedEx, so that was pretty cool. But no, it pioneered that the ability of e-commerce and back then catalog companies to compete with store retail because you could have the package from North Carolina to California in 1 or 2 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Revolutionary. If you were to describe yourself in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
I would say passionate, resilient, and I think humble. I'm not, humble and real. I think
Mm,
I'll give you 3.5 or 4
I'll take it.
because
I'll take it.
fake people drive me nuts. Life is too short. And back to the whole thing about the transplant, you realize more and more, let's not waste the time. And part of wasting time is not just being overly deliberate, it's being phony and not
Mhm.
really getting at the issues. So,
Right. Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Being intentional, being reliable, so critical.
yeah,
What are you most excited about within your business tomorrow, going into the next year or two?
the ability to help. Demographically, you've got the silver tsunami, aging baby boomers needing to retire, sell their businesses, hand the business over, transition in some fashion, and they need help. And my feeling is I want to go in and help. And I'm very excited when someone calls me and says, I'm struggling. I need to sell. I've had situations where a husband passed away or there was some other family issue that has caused a situation to happen that required very short-term action. And those are important. So I love being able to be there and help people solve these problems and get to whatever that next chapter is. If their idea is to go on cruises, great. If their idea is to have more time with grandkids, that's great too. Whatever it might be, that excites me because I'm helping them to get to that point. They can't until they've transitioned.
Right. Right. Fair. Do you have a guiding quote or a mantra or something that you follow in how you approach what you're doing, be that with a client or in life in general? I mean, you've said a couple, um, be urgent but not panicked, right?
Yep. Yep.
Anything else that sort of pops to mind?
Yeah, there are a couple. That's another great question, Chandler. You asked some really good ones. I gotta say, that's your job though. You crush it. Probably a couple of them. There's a very lengthy quote that I don't have memorized, but it's from Machiavelli,
Sure.
where he talks about change, how difficult it is. That's a big one for me. People don't wake up wanting to change things, and it's work. It's hard work. No one's on board immediately. Either you're defiantly against it, or you're too cautious and going to play wait and see. That's one of them. And the other is, the great philosopher Rocky Balboa. Okay, it's not a matter of how hard you can hit, but it's a matter of how hard you can get hit and keep on fighting, because we all get hit in life. I just think that's very, very true. We get beaten up, we have challenges, but are you going to keep fighting, or are you going to just cower into the corner of the ring?
And that's, I think, in all honesty, if anyone were ever to ask me what the difference was between a successful person and an unsuccessful person, perceived unsuccessful person, what's the difference, in the millionaires and the thousandaires? And I think it's the millionaires, the billionaires, they continue to get back up after getting
Yeah,
hit. They do not lay on the mat. And the
that's
difference
right.
is they got up one more time than the person that quit, you know?
That's exactly it. And I love that approach. And we've all tripped and fallen somewhere, and we never stop that, right? That's just part of our lives. But you got to keep fighting and keep going at it, and stay the course.
Do you have a morning routine that you follow that sort of sets you up for the day, or an evening routine, journaling or otherwise, and meditation to, what does that look like for you?
I pray particularly at night. I pray during the day from time to time. I pray at night, my wife and me, and then try to go into that deep slumber if that's possible. Sometimes not always easy because of things floating around my mind. In terms of the morning, we try to make that quiet time, and it starts with a nice cup of coffee. So, quiet time, maybe there's a business news on in the background. Maybe there are things we've got to talk about the day, but just I like to ease into my day.
Close. Yeah.
I really do. Now, once the day's going, it's full speed ahead, but I don't want full speed ahead the first half hour of my day. I can tell you that.
Yeah, yeah. It's a walk in from the beach, not a dive off the diving board.
It is. I do the diving later in the day and sometimes late at night, but not early in the morning. No,
Fair
sir.
enough. Fair enough. So this question may have a different meaning to you than some others, but what is the one thing that you're most afraid of? And that you can be as vulnerable as you wish, personal or business. And what instills that fear?
I'll be honest with you. Nothing really comes to mind in terms of being fearful of anything. I'm a pretty, I guess if I could rephrase it, the most uncertain of
Please.
is I would probably say I want people to really understand why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Hmm.
Um, in a lot of my best business work, the common denominator was give me the problem and essentially a blank sheet of paper with some scribbles on it, maybe, but not a well laid out business plan, and let me go at it. Sometimes
Hmm.
people don't understand that.
Mm.
So the fear is sometimes you look like you're not going to be as focused or as diligent. Believe me, I love the diligence, but my approach is a little different, and you want people to understand that. So
Fair enough. So we just touched on success. What is what does success look like to you?
I think impacting lives in some positive way, helping them become better people. If in business, if in business it means helping them to transition to fix their company, fix their business, transition, whatever that might mean, that's success. And if I can sew into somebody in some fashion and have them grow, I love the back to the whole basketball thing. You want your teammates to do well.
Right.
I had a student, former student from my part-time teaching days, reach out to me 5, 6 years ago and said, Jeff, will you mentor me? I said, wow. Yeah, I'll mentor you. The gentleman lives in South Africa. We have Zoom calls once a month, and
You.
it's just an amazing time together. And I'm not going to kid you. Yeah, I've provided some insights and been a sounding board for him. But you know what? He's one of a handful of people I've given permission to ride me about the progress of my book. Ben Joya's one. My wife's
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
His name is Gavin. Gavin's the other one that I said, yeah, ride me anytime you want.
Yeah.
And he'll send me little calendar invites with different quotes. Some of them are Rocky Balboa quotes, by the way. Uh, but no, I just want people to be, life's short. I just want to impact people in a very positive way, help them to be better people, whether it's better fathers, mothers, kids,
Mhm.
business people, whatever it might be. Just do your best and not be ashamed about it.
Y- You know, I think, and maybe it's the space that I'm in, and please push back on me if I'm mistaken in my assessment here. But there's a such a hard focus on perfectionism for such a long time, and I feel like today we're starting to, and maybe my bias is that we're a little further along than I think we are, but I think we're much more willing to accept mistakes and reflect upon the lessons that are learned from those mistakes rather than look to achieve perfectionism and just be
Yep.
that little bit better tomorrow than we were today in all aspects.
Yep.
I think, like you said, be your best. And I think reflecting on that at the end of the day and saying, having a moment to self-reflect and look at what I could have done better
Yep.
today that will make me better tomorrow.
Right.
What did I get upset about? What made me be defensive?
Mhm.
What frustrated me and why did it frustrate me? And
Right.
then take those steps tomorrow. And if the same thing frustrates you again, double down on that and hold yourself accountable about allowing yourself to be in that position to
Yep.
have that experience.
I couldn't agree more because I think, there is no such thing as perfection in the business world or in your daily life. You're going to drop a ball. I think we want to learn from it. The infamous 1% better every day. That's not a bad approach.
Mhm.
I think back to I think this was probably as impactful uh, performance review that I've ever had. I was managing and coaching a gentleman who was very self-taught, very smart. The guy could make spreadsheets sing.
Mm.
He was just gifted, but he had not an ounce of risk taking in his entire body. And I told him, I said, I'm tired of you batting 1,000 every year.
Yeah.
You're going 3 for 3. I need you to go 5 for 11
Mm.
and then 7 for 17. And he looked at me like puzzled. I said, because the thing is, we're going to catch the failures. They're not going to be $1 million losses. We're going to stop them. But think of all you've learned from what didn't work. And also, what about those 2 or 3 or 4 additional successes?
Mhm.
And we're at a time in our business where we were growing this particular business significantly, but we're getting to a little bit of a plateau.
Mhm.
And I think that mindset really helped us propel. I said, get over this whole thing of trying to be perfect. There's no such thing. You're in marketing, for Pete's sakes. Marketers make mistakes every day.
Right.
I mean, we're not talking about the new Coke here, where you're on display is, a decision like that.
Sure.
And it helped him because, to your point, let's be real and secure. Don't hide the mistakes because
Hmm.
they're growth opportunities. Just catch them as early as possible so they don't become catastrophic.
Hmm. You got it.
Yeah.
What are you? Are you a Marvel, DC? Like, what's your superhero? Who's your the person that you aspire to be like, or that I don't want to say idolize, because
Yeah.
let's not have an idol, but who's that mentor, that person that you admire so deeply that you know
There's a lot. I'm going to go back to one
Mhm.
real and one fictitious.
Please.
Um, the real one is Parker Overton, the gentleman who hired me into that position
Okay.
back in the 80s. Neither one of us are perfect people, but he drove me to be my best. Didn't give me anything. I earned everything.
Right.
We didn't always get along on every topic, but you know what? He was a father to me at the time, father figure. We talk several times a month about life, about our faith, about college football, about something, you know? So he's one, Parker Overton, 81 years old. And I love the man. And I tell him that. I tell him that on every call. Love you, man, before we hang up.
Hmm.
The other one's my man, Rocky Balboa, because I think we need some Rocky in us, the fight, the being
Yeah.
laughed at, the being told you can't do this, and then you win. And you get knocked down because you got a little arrogant. You get back up. And, I could watch those movies all day long. Maybe I'm not the most intriguing guy when I say that, but I love it.
No, no, but I think there's an aspirational quality there, and
Yes.
maybe it isn't the best cinema, but the story is transcendent,
Well,
right?
maybe
And
it is the
and
best cinema. But
but yeah, no, and I think it's that story, it's that inspiration, it's
yeah,
that if they can do it, so can you, sort of
yeah,
sort of mentality. It's just how many hits are you going to take and still get back up?
right. And
Right?
what's interesting though, we'll make this even more real. And I'm not one that has these. I'd love to have dinner with these 20 different celebrities, but one I would is Sylvester Stallone. I put it out
Mhm.
there.
Yeah.
Maybe he's watching this. I hope he is, and he'll call me. But the reality is, you know, he wrote the first Rocky movie, and was really dedicated to that script and believed in it. He wasn't rolling in money at the time. He was struggling as a professional. I mean, he was the Rocky. And I think that's what's really cool about it. He believed in it. He fought for it. He found others to join his vision. Isn't that what we all do as leaders?
Right.
And so there's a great background there, and I think he portrays that in cinema, which is great cinema, by the way. I never took a movie class, but I always wanted to.
Fair. Fair. So, Heart of Transition launches in Q3. Are
Mhm.
we are we on track to see that? Are your people around you supporting you and keeping you on
Oh
schedule
yeah,
for that? Yeah.
absolutely. And you say you're my fourth now to ride me about it, which is okay. Writing a book is different because, and I've had to deal with the whole perfection thing. Is everything going to be perfect? And Ben Joya, who's helped me quite a bit, I mean,
Mhm.
every week, he reminds you of this, and gets you in a different kind of a rhythm and a groove. Get comfortable with yourself. Your mess to success. One of the approaches he uses. So yes, it's going to happen Q3, but it has been probably the single biggest challenge I've ever embarked on because I have dealt with more of the perfection syndrome than in any other area of my life. If I'm going to do a presentation, I want to do my best. If I make a mistake, I'm going to fix it. Not as much on the printed page, right? So you want it to be, and I want to bring something valuable to people because I do want people to learn from the mistakes of others and what has happened. So I have that passion. So
Of
my
course.
motive is there. But by the same token, yes, it's going to happen in Q3, one way or another.
Exciting. Well, It, Jeff, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved the conversation. I love the perspective. I'm so happy you joined me. Thank you for being
Well,
so
thank you.
generous with
I appreciate the approach you take to this podcast. It's a fantastic podcast, and it was just amazing to be here. And I appreciate that chance, Chandler.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeff.
You bet. Thank you.
Hey there, and welcome back to Culturally Sound. I am here with Jeff Parnell of JHP and no, screwed that up. Give me 2 seconds.